Hey everybody, welcome back to, I almost said X-Plane 11. Welcome back to Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. And today we're going to look at the default Bonanza G36, Beechcraft Bonanza G36. If it looks like I'm not fully into this, it's because this is the third attempt at trying to record this video. OBS has been having some issues with the sim running in the background. So hopefully we don't have any stuttering issues, but I wanted to get this out because this is my favorite plane, and unfortunately this plane is butchered in the sim. There's a couple of kind of minor things for a default plane, and there's one major thing that makes this plane, to me, and especially being my favorite airplane in the real world, unflyable. So I'm going to do a quick little startup. We're not going to use any checklists, so this is just kind of based off of my experience with the plane in the real world. My instructor flies an A36 Bonanza, which airframe-wise is the same as this plane. This just has the G1000 suite in it. So avionics and panel are going to be very different from the plane that I've flown, but the actual aircraft and performance figures and everything are basically the same. So we'll take off, we'll do a little flight, and I'll point out some things that I noticed right away. This isn't going to be like super scientific and thorough in terms of a breakdown of the numbers and everything. This is going to be largely just a you know, one of these things. Like, it just doesn't quite line up. So first off, I have to say, credit where credit is due. It looks fantastic. It's beautifully modeled on the outside. The textures look great. It does look like it just rolled off the factory floor, which is fine. I mean, a lot of racing games, computer games will have things that are modeled that just look brand new and not worn and lived in, which is totally fine. Not really a complaint, just a just noticing the fact that it does look brand spanking new. But the textures on the exterior are great. The story changes a little bit on the interior, I think, texture-wise. It looks even more plasticky and sterile. There's a lot of, just kind of weird graphical glitches. The carpet seam, the leather just looks very plasticky and very previous generation, I guess. Like, it doesn't hold up with the rest of the way the sim looks and feels. So a little bit disappointing in terms of the actual texture in the interior, but everything's in the right spot. Everything looks good that you interact with. The throttle quadrant looks really nice. The prop and mixture controls, those actual handles look really nice. So there's some things that do kind of hold up, and a lot of the lighting, I think, has a lot to do with that, because the lighting in this sim game, whatever, is really nice. So some of the reflections and everything do make it look a little bit nicer. So loading up here, we're at French Valley. This was the site of the real world 4LE fly-in, and I just kind of wanted to check it out. The default scenery here is not too bad. This is, some of the funky little, you're a little bit too far away from it to render buildings, but overall the scenery here looks pretty good. So starting up a Bonanza, it is a high performance complex plane, but it is not that complex to start. So we'll do just kind of like a little flow, similar to the 172. You can do a door to floor, floor to door type of flow here. First thing, make sure the fuel is on and the cutoff is off. This, for some reason, always defaults to cowl flaps closed. You want to start with the cowl flaps open. I don't think it's simulated. I actually don't think it matters whatsoever in this sim right now, but at least real world, you want that open. Mixture is going to be full forward. Prop is going to be full forward. We'll leave the throttle where it is right now. Gear lever is down. Lights are all off. Everything else is all off. So we'll get the batteries coming on, and we'll also get the beacon coming on, and it is not nighttime, so we don't need the nav lights. And then we're going to wait 5 seconds with the auxiliary fuel pump going and get it primed with the throttle kind of cracked a little bit. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't do anything to the fuel flow. Like maybe ticks it over like a little bit, but it doesn't really do much. Okay, so now that that is done, we will look ahead and make sure that we're clear of any high-vis vest ramp workers. Also make sure that the parking brake is on, which it is. It does look like it is set. And starts right up. That's good. And bring the mixture back a little bit while it warms up, and just keep it at about, each plane's a little bit different, but you know, 12 to 1,000 to 1,200 RPM for warming up. That's good right there. So we'll clear that caution. The G1000 is like super lame, so I'm not even gonna bother with screwing with that. We'll bring on the second system, which is gonna load up. I'm trying to turn off that. Yeah, I'm not gonna touch the avionics at all. It's really not worth it. So once we have a good startup, we're gonna get the landing and taxi lights coming on. The floodlights and panel lights do look pretty nice. I haven't tested them out at night, but it does light up pretty nicely. Okay, so that's good, and it is starting to warm up. Oil temps are already in the green, so that's cool. Okay, let's make sure that the trim is set to 0. I might get that zeroed out. The air conditioning is in op, so yeah, it's not going to do anything. All right, so once we're started up, that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple plane to start up. We'll just call it warmed up and taxi out to the runway. And I'll do a quick run up. We're gonna have to run over some taxi lights in the process, but this highlights one of the main issues that I have with this plane, and that is the turning radius. The real world turning radius in a A36 G36 airframe is actually pretty good. It's very maneuverable on the ramp, and this makes it turn like a freaking dump truck. And it's just not the case. I mean, there's full lock right there, and I have to put in right toe brake to get it whipped around. But if you just are going off of the rudder there, it's just gonna barely turn, and it's not fun. Okay, so let's do a quick run up. We're gonna check the control surfaces. So left, right, that looks good. Left, right, that looks good. Check the elevator, that looks good. On the ground, the elevator is really heavy, at least on the A36, with that single big yoke. I've sat in a G36. I haven't flown in one, but yeah, it is very heavy on the ground. Once you get rolling though and get some airflow over the surfaces, it lightens up a lot. Okay, so let's get the mixture, enriching the mixture a little bit. We'll bring the power up. And we're going to highlight one of the other issues of this. We'll keep it at 1800 there. So we're going to check the mags, and we're going to go right first and then left, and see if you can listen. Right, and there's left. It drops about 10 RPM, so almost no drop in the mags when you're checking that. And then RPM, there's no drop until you get to about 50, mid 50s in the percentage before the prop starts to come down. That will happen a lot sooner. But we're cycling the prop just to make sure that there's oil in the prop governor, and that the prop governor is working properly. So that is not modeled very well at all. Okay, so the engine's warmed up. We're ready to go. We're not going to do any radio calls or anything like that. We're just going to taxi out. Flaps are going to be up for for takeoff, excuse me. Flaps are up. The trim has been set. And let's get on the transponder just for fun. So if you want to know how to do that, it's just the transponder button, VFR, Alt, and that will turn it on. And it has been turned on. Okay, so that is working. Whoop, I went right through our hold short line. And then we're gonna do, we're gonna get the strobes on, and we've got the other lights on as well. So this is gonna happen pretty quick, and I'll try to stay on top of it without having things mapped to my hardware. And I'll try to walk through it a little bit, but it does happen pretty quick in the real plane. And I don't have the switches configured yet because it doesn't work. So I'll try to keep up with it as you would in the real world, but just keep in mind it is going a little bit slower, and I do want to show the gear swing on this plane. So lights, strobes coming on, camera, transponder is on, action, mixture's coming full rich, and get onto the center line, which is pretty hard to get it onto center line and rolling onto the runway because of that lack of turning radius. Okay, so there is full speed, full power, and I am having to hold a little bit of right rudder to keep it going straight. About 75 it starts to lift off, so there's 75, it gets light, and then you just let the plane kind of come up. Tap on the brakes, and then gear is coming up, and watch the gear swing. So that is pretty close to Bonanza gear swing speeds. It does swing in about 2.5 seconds. I'm gonna get the taxi and landing legs coming off. That's something that you would do basically before you hit the gear, and then you also bring the prop back just a little bit as well, and just get it off the limiter. It's really more for sound, just to be a little bit quieter, and the plane has plenty of power to climb out. So I'm going to climb out right now. The prop is pulled back a little bit, but I don't know if you saw the percentage that it's pulled back. It's at 85. I'm going to even creep it up a little bit more. There is 90, 95. No, is that 98? No, I want 95, dude. 95. Okay, there's 95. And then we're going to turn out here. I don't know if you can hear, but it sounds like we're in overdrive. And I just pulled the prop back 5%. It's at 2590 RPM. Manifold pressure is still full. I haven't pulled back manifold pressure at all. I am climbing at a pretty good rate. The climb seems to be okay. I'm at 112 knots right now, and we're climbing out at 1,000 feet per minute. So that's not really bad. Scenery looks amazing, by the way. Cowl flaps are still open as we climb out, and that's just for temperatures. That keeps the engine a little bit cooler, and if you close those as you're climbing up in the desert on a hot day, the engine can get a little bit warm. It does add drag, so we will close that here momentarily. So I'm going to climb up to 4,500 feet, and that is a, you know, kind of typical VFR cruising altitude. The party piece of the Bonanza, A36, G36, is its speed. They have it right in the menu. If you look at the menu when you select your plane, you can see that the cruising speed for the G36 is 176 knots. That is true for the G36 and the A36. Straight and level, cruising at 176 knots. We have 3 different airspeeds that we're going to look at here and compare. Again, I'm holding maximum manifold pressure. I'm going to bring back the mixture a little bit. Holding 112 knots in the climb, still climbing pretty good at 1,000 feet per minute. So that's a pretty good climb. It's kind of going up and down due to the sensitivity on the elevator. So we're climbing okay. I feel like it is at a accurate looking pitch angle for this climb. So that's good. The airspeed is okay, but it's a little bit draggy. It feels like it should be going a little bit quicker, even at this phase, pitched up. And I'm looking at like 7 degrees nose up, so not a crazy climb out angle. And if you're a Bonanza anorak, you might even dispute that pitch angle for that speed in the power settings, but we're not going to get that nerdy into it. But some of you might might recognize what's about to happen here. Okay, so heading bug, we're going to click the heading bug and center that, turn the AP on, heading, and altitude is set. This is just because trim in flight sims are a pain in the ass. Straighten level here. 20. We'll do 23 squared. So we'll bring the manifold pressure back to 23. And yeah, there's 23, and then we're gonna move the prop back to 2300 RPM. 2300 RPM, bringing that back. 23, almost dead. We're 10 RPM below. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt and kick it up a little bit. There's 2370, 2380. Okay, so almost 2400. We're a little bit faster on the prop. Mixture control. Let's see where the RPMs drop. Nothing's happening. 36% mixture. 30% mixture. 20. 19. Hello, can it go? 15. Uh-oh. 14. 10. Oh, there we go. So mixture's at 10 before we get a drop in the RPM. Now where's it peak? Seems to peak around 60. All right, so let's just say that, okay, that's a value that we can change. That's fine. Ridiculous that it goes down to 10, but let's just say that we're leaned out right there. We'll call it 23 squared. It's basically 24 squared now. So we'll call this a performance cruise. Okay, and we are doing 123 indicated, 133 true, and over the ground we're doing 136 knots. That is the entire purpose that you take the Bonanza. That's it. Is you've got, oh, you know what? We'll do you one better here, Bonanza. We'll give you cowl flaps fully closed. How does that change what we're doing here? Not really any. 140 true. Let's look outside and see. I mean, it looks great. It sounds okay. The engine is still not as loud compared to other noises in the plane itself, but that looks and sounds pretty good, right? But it just completely defeats the purpose of having a Bonanza. So since this is the third time and these reactions are not genuine because I've already done this. I mean, I literally recorded a video where I found this out kind of live. Like, it was like, hey everybody, we're gonna fly the Bonanza for the first time. And I just was like, what is happening right now? Turns out that the engine performance characteristics that they implemented for this plane, which they've even stated has a cruise speed of 176 knots, is the performance figures for a 4-cylinder engine. So it is just completely balls to the wall. It will only do like 140 indicated at this altitude. It's mind-boggling how stupid that is. There's a number of reasons, and this is not designed to bash the simulator at all, because what they've done is pretty remarkable, all things considered, and it's my opinion that there are just too many planes available at launch. They should have pared the plane selection down and made them more fully fledged planes. X-Plane had a very small list of default planes, but they were relatively fully functional. They maybe didn't look that great, but they were at least systems wise a lot more there than this is. This is a shell of an airplane, unfortunately. So very disappointing as a huge fan of this plane to essentially not be able to fly it because it's so slow. It drives me crazy to just be moving this slowly in the plane. A week and a half ago, actually leaving the fly-in real life, my friend Q flew in formation with me in the Bonanza 836. I was in a Piper Archer, just trying as best I could to keep going at 115. He had the flaps down. Manifold pressure was at like 16 or something, 18, super low, and he's just cruising along really, really slow. And he said it felt really weird to fly that slow in that plane. It completely takes away all of the purpose of this plane. I mean, it would be like loading up in a Bugatti Veyron in Forza and it only has 5 gears. You're just like, well, what's the point of it? Just a big Volkswagen at that point. So this is just a big GA plane, club seat, I don't know, Piper, 4-cylinder Cherokee. So disappointing. I think they'll fix it. There'll be a fix for it. There'll be a manual fix for it even. There's already configurations out there, crowdsourced, that will increase the power and get a little bit better performance out of it. So by no means you're stuck with it doing this, and I will update those figures to get it more true to the cruise speed. But I don't like doing that because it's never as good as if it's done correctly by the developer right away. So I am disappointed, but I hope that there'll be a really solid solution soon. The other thing that it does is it changes the way you land it, because all the numbers seem to be lowered. This plane will stop flying at about 70 knots. You want to be like 70 something over the numbers, and it doesn't feel like it. When you're starting to pull out the power, it stops flying at 60 knots. So we're going to land here at March. The gear is you're able to operate the gear at 156 knots, which we're obviously going nowhere near. So I can pop the gear out perfectly safely at this speed, and it just acts as a speed brake. So we need to trim. So I got the trim coming in. Got to trim a lot to land this thing, and this trim is really slow, at least on the wheel, but the action that it gives you is a lot. So we'll pull back the power mixture. I'll pull the mixture in. We're not really that high. The prop is going to stay the same because, in the real plane, you'd have enough power to climb out. You don't need to go prop full forward in this, if you needed to go around. So just leave the prop where it's at, and then start pulling back the manifold pressure, and it really doesn't want to slow down too much. We'll just go right to the numbers here. And one of the things I was saying with the engine not being loud enough compared to the other sound effects, you've got the aero load over the wings when you're in a roll. I don't know if you can hear that low hum. You're not gonna have there's no way you're gonna hear that at all. Engine is just too big and loud. Okay, approach flaps are in. Continuing to trim, and as you trim, the speed just bleeds off. It's almost magical. You leave the power at descent setting, which is much higher than we have it set now, and you just start to trim, and as the nose comes up, it just slows the plane down really nicely. So I'm going to try to keep it at the normal speed you'd come in at, and it's Just it feels like it wants to be much slower than you would normally. So there is 65. I mean, you'd be not happy at that speed. And power's coming off. There's 60. And comes down. I've landed, like I said, I've done this flight, done this video a handful of times, so I've really only landed it 3 times. And it just doesn't have the interconnected feel of all of what you're managing to land the plane. Flaps, gear, prop, mixture. I mean, mixture doesn't really have too much of a role. Pitch, the trim, the airspeed numbers. None of it feels like it's doing what it is supposed to do. What are 2 things that we missed on the checklist for landing there? Cowl flaps were not open and our lights were not on. Shame. I should have like a shame bell if I forget an item on a checklist. Ring the shame bell. This plane, unfortunately, also gets a little bit of the shame bell for right now, at least default. There's going to be some fixes, but I just wanted to lend my real-world experience to what I found in this plane in Flight Sim 2020. So we're off to a relatively decent start overall, but there's some glaring deficiencies in many of the planes and systems that were delivered right out of the box. I still believe that this is a very fancy paid beta, but it is a fun one. So if you would like to watch more videos, subscribe. If you want to join live, there's links in the description for the Discord server and for the Twitch broadcasts, where we do a lot of group fly-ins, which this sim is just perfect, tailor-made for that. But if you're interested in aviation for the first time and getting into it, there's no better resource, I believe, than the Discord server. So the link is in the description. CFIs, CFIIs, MEIs, air traffic controllers, real-world pilots from student all the way to commercial airliner. And we all love flight simulators and aviation. So we would love to have new people come in and ask a bunch of questions because we love this stuff and we want this to be a gateway to the larger world of aviation, not just simulator flying. Because the real world stuff, if you think this is fun, the real world stuff is way more accessible than you think and really, really fun. The other thing I wanted to show here before we end is how ridiculous it is to tail strike this. Barely any speed. I mean, we're just rolling out here. I've got full back pressure and there's a tail strike. I mean, it is like just unbelievably sensitive. That's at 20, 25 knots that it pops up. We're doing 30 right now. It just, you do not have that authority. Don't let this discourage you though. Fly it, see for yourself. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you guys hopefully live soon. Take care. See ya.